Hello there. Tonight, you are not just listening to a story. You are descending into a place older than memory, deeper than fear, and quieter than anything you have ever known. Beneath the surface of our world, far below the reach of sunlight, lies an ocean that does not care if it is seen or understood. A world where light disappears, pressure becomes overwhelming, and time itself seems to slow until it almost stands still. Down there, there are creatures that glow like distant stars, giants that move without sound, and entire ecosystems that thrive without ever knowing the sun exists. It is not empty. It is not lifeless. It is waiting. And as you drift deeper into this calm darkness, something strange begins to happen. The fear fades. And if you find yourself drawn into this quiet journey, I invite you calmly and simply to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Not out of urgency, not out of habit, but as a quiet way of staying connected to more journeys like this. Now, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin our descent into the deepest, quietest place on Earth. Chapter 1. The Silent World Beneath Sunlight. Hello there, and welcome. Tonight, we begin a slow descent into one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Not the stars above, but the ocean below. A vast, quiet world that covers more than 70% of our planet, yet remains in many ways less understood than the surface of the moon. As you settle in, allow your breathing to slow, your body to soften, and your mind to drift gently downward into the deep. The ocean begins with light. The uppermost layer of the ocean is known as the sunlight zone, and it stretches from the surface down to about 200 meters. This is the only part of the ocean where sunlight penetrates strongly enough to support photosynthesis, the process that allows plants and microscopic organisms to convert light into energy. And yet, even here, the ocean already begins to feel vast and endless. One of the first quiet truths about this world is that sunlight behaves differently underwater. As it travels deeper, colors begin to disappear one by one. Red fades first, then orange, then yellow, until eventually only blue light remains. This is why the ocean appears so deeply blue. Not because it is reflecting the sky, but because blue wavelengths penetrate the farthest. As you imagine descending slowly, notice how the colors soften, how the world becomes calmer, quieter, less defined. In this upper layer, life is abundant. Tiny organisms called phytoplankton drift through the water, absorbing sunlight and producing oxygen. In fact, these microscopic life forms are responsible for producing more than half of the oxygen you breathe right now. So with each breath you take, part of it was created far out at sea by drifting invisible life. Fish, dolphins, and large marine animals move through this region with ease. But even here, there is a hidden complexity. The ocean is not still, it is constantly in motion. Currents flow like invisible rivers, carrying heat, nutrients, and life across vast distances. Some of these currents are so powerful, they influence global climate patterns. Another quiet truth is that the surface of the ocean is rarely calm. Even when it looks smooth, beneath it there are layers of movement. Water of different temperatures and salinities creates subtle boundaries, known as thermoclines and haloclines. These layers can feel almost like invisible walls separating one world from another. As you drift deeper in your imagination, The warmth of the surface begins to fade. Temperature drops gradually, and the pressure increases. Even at just 100 meters below the surface, the pressure is already several times greater than what you feel on land. And yet, for the creatures that live here, this is simply home. Many fish in this zone have adapted to the shifting light. Some have reflective scales that shimmer and flash, helping them blend into the flickering patterns of sunlight above. Others have evolved countershading, dark on top, light underneath, so they disappear whether viewed from above or below. It's a quiet kind of camouflage, almost like a whisper of survival. Another fascinating truth is that sound travels differently in water. In fact, sound moves nearly 5 times faster in water than in air. This means that the ocean is not silent at all. It is filled with distant echoes, clicks, and calls. Whales can communicate across entire ocean basins. Their low-frequency songs can travel thousands of kilometers, carrying messages through the darkness. But as we move deeper, human noise fades away. What remains is something softer, more ancient. Sunlight begins to weaken now. At around 150 meters, light is already dim. Shadows stretch longer. Colors have mostly vanished. The world becomes a place of blues and grays, gentle gradients instead of sharp contrasts. Here, you might notice another subtle truth, that the deeper you go, the less familiar everything feels. Shapes become less distinct. Movement becomes slower, more deliberate. And yet life continues. Some creatures begin to show the first hints of something extraordinary: bioluminescence, the ability to produce light from within their own bodies. Even in the upper layers, small flashes of glowing blue or green can sometimes be seen, like distant stars beneath the water. This natural light is not just beautiful, it serves many purposes. It can attract prey, confuse predators, or help creatures communicate in the dimming world. As you continue to drift downward, your body feels lighter, your thoughts slower. Another quiet truth emerges here: the ocean holds heat differently than land. Water absorbs and stores heat much more efficiently, which is why coastal regions often have more stable climates. The ocean acts as a vast thermal buffer, regulating the temperature of the entire planet. Without it, Earth would be a far more extreme and unstable place. Even waves, which seem so simple, carry enormous energy. A single wave traveling across the ocean may have originated from a storm thousands of kilometers away. By the time it reaches a distant shore, it carries with it the memory of winds that no longer exist. The ocean is full of these quiet connections, invisible links between distant places. As light fades further, you begin to notice how time itself seems to slow. Movement becomes smoother. The sense of urgency fades. And here is another truth. Most of the ocean's life does not live at the surface. It exists below, in deeper, darker layers. The world we usually see, the waves, the sunlight, the familiar fish, is only a thin skin over something far more vast. In fact, more than 90% of the ocean's volume lies beneath this sunlit zone, and we have explored only a small fraction of it. As you continue your descent, the last strong rays of sunlight stretch thin, dissolving into soft, fading blue. You are leaving behind a world of brightness and entering something quieter, something deeper, something almost dreamlike. And as you drift here between light and darkness, the ocean feels endless. Calm, still, waiting. As you continue drifting gently downward, the last traces of bright sunlight begin to thin into something softer, more distant, like a memory fading at the edge of your mind. This upper layer of the ocean, though filled with life, is only the beginning of a much larger story. And even here, where light still reaches, there are quiet details that often go unnoticed. One of those truths is how delicately balanced this world really is. Phytoplankton, those tiny drifting organisms we spoke of earlier, are not just oxygen producers. They are also the foundation of nearly every ocean food chain. Small fish feed on them, larger fish feed on those fish, and eventually, even the largest creatures in the ocean depend, in some indirect way, on these microscopic life forms. And yet, phytoplankton populations can shift quickly. Changes in temperature, light, or nutrient availability can cause massive blooms or sudden declines. Entire ecosystems can quietly rise and fall based on something too small to see with the naked eye. As you imagine yourself floating here, suspended between the surface and the deeper unknown, it becomes clear how interconnected everything is. Another gentle truth is that sunlight does not just fade with depth, it also changes direction. Waves on the surface bend and scatter light, creating moving patterns below. These shifting patterns, sometimes called caustics, ripple across the bodies of fish and the ocean floor, creating a constantly moving mosaic of light. For creatures living here, this movement is normal. It is part of their rhythm, their sense of place. And yet, for us, it would feel almost hypnotic. Time in the ocean flows differently, not because clocks change, but because motion changes. There are no roads, no boundaries, no fixed points. Everything drifts slowly, continuously. Even creatures that appear still are often moving with subtle currents. Some species take advantage of this constant motion in remarkable ways. There are fish and gelatinous animals that expend very little energy, simply allowing themselves to drift with currents, conserving strength in a world where food can sometimes be unpredictable. Energy here is precious. Another truth that often surprises people is how transparent many ocean creatures are. In the sunlight zone, being invisible is often the best form of protection. Some fish, larvae, and small jelly-like organisms have bodies that are nearly completely see-through, making them almost impossible to detect. It's a different kind of camouflage, one that doesn't rely on hiding behind something, but on becoming almost nothing at all. As you drift deeper still, the light now feels softer, cooler, more distant from the warmth of the surface. Temperature continues to drop, but not sharply. Instead, it's gradual, like stepping into shade after standing in sunlight. This gentle cooling is part of what creates the thermocline, a layer where temperature changes more rapidly with depth. For marine life, crossing this boundary can feel like entering a different world. Some species remain above it, others below, and a few move between these layers daily, following food or avoiding predators in a slow, vertical migration that happens every single night across the globe. This daily movement is known as the largest migration on Earth, not across land, but up and down through the water. Billions of small organisms rise toward the surface under the cover of darkness, feeding in the safer shadows, and then descend again before dawn. A quiet, synchronized rhythm, happening every night, almost entirely unseen. As your imagined descent continues, the sounds of the surface grow fainter. But the ocean is never truly silent. There are subtle clicks, distant echoes, low vibrations that travel effortlessly through water. Marine animals rely heavily on sound, not just for communication, but for navigation. Dolphins and whales use echolocation, sending out pulses of sound and listening for the returning echoes to understand their surroundings. In a world where visibility fades, sound becomes a kind of vision. Another gentle truth is that the ocean filters not only light, but also human presence. Just a short distance below the surface, the noise and movement of the world above begin to disappear. Boats, wind, even distant storms become muted, softened, until they are barely noticeable. It's a kind of natural quiet, one that feels almost protective. And yet, even here, human influence can still be felt. Changes in ocean temperature, pollution, and rising acidity are beginning to affect even the upper layers of the sea. Coral reefs, which exist within this sunlight zone, are particularly sensitive. When water becomes too warm, corals can lose the symbiotic algae that give them color and energy, a process known as coral bleaching. When this happens, entire ecosystems can fade slowly and silently. But there is also resilience here. Some species adapt, shift, survive in changing conditions. The ocean has always been a place of transformation, and it continues to be. As you drift now at the lower edge of the sunlight zone, something subtle begins to change. Light is no longer constant. It flickers, fades, breaks apart into scattered beams that no longer fully illuminate the space around you. Shadows deepen. Colors have nearly vanished, leaving only soft blues and grays. This is the threshold, the boundary between the familiar and the unknown. And here is another truth, one that feels almost poetic. The deeper you go, the more the ocean begins to resemble space. Vast, dark, and filled with life that glows faintly in the distance. Even in this transition zone, tiny flashes of bioluminescence become more noticeable. Small organisms emit brief pulses of light, sometimes in response to movement, sometimes as a form of communication, and sometimes for reasons we still don't fully understand. These flashes are not constant, but when they appear, they feel almost magical, like stars blinking into existence, then fading away. As your descent slows, you find yourself suspended in this quiet space between light and darkness. Above you, the surface is still faintly visible, a distant shimmer. Below you, the ocean deepens into something darker, calmer, more mysterious. And here, in this gentle pause, another truth becomes clear. The ocean is not divided into sharp layers, but into gradual transitions. There is no sudden line where one world ends and another begins. Instead, everything changes slowly, almost imperceptibly, until you realize you're somewhere entirely different. It is a place of patience, of quiet transformation, of endless depth. And as you drift here, weightless, surrounded by fading light and soft movement, your mind begins to follow the same rhythm as the ocean itself. Slow, steady, calm. The sunlight above continues to fade until it becomes little more than a distant glow. And ahead, the deeper ocean waits. Chapter 2. The twilight zone where light fades. As you continue your slow, effortless descent, the last soft glow of the surface begins to dissolve behind you. You are now entering a region known as the twilight zone, or, in scientific terms, the mesopelagic zone. It stretches from about 200 meters down to roughly 1,000 meters below the surface. Here, sunlight no longer fully illuminates the ocean. Instead, it arrives weak, scattered, like the final light of dusk lingering after sunset. This is not complete darkness, not yet, but it is a world where light is no longer reliable. And that changes everything. One of the first quiet truths of the twilight zone is that vision becomes uncertain. Shapes blur. Distances become difficult to judge. Even the direction of light becomes confusing as it filters down unevenly from above. For many creatures here, survival depends on adapting to this uncertainty. Some species develop extraordinarily large eyes, designed to capture even the faintest traces of light. Others take a different path entirely, abandoning vision in favor of other senses like vibration detection or chemical signals. In this dim world, seeing is no longer everything. Another truth is that this layer of the ocean is far more populated than it first appears. In fact, the twilight zone may contain more fish biomass than all the world's fisheries combined. But because of the darkness and depth, much of this life remains hidden from us. Entire communities exist here, moving slowly through the dim blue shadows. As you drift deeper, the color blue begins to fade as well. The ocean no longer glows with soft light. Instead, it takes on a darker, more muted tone. The boundary between water and shadow becomes harder to distinguish. It is here that bioluminescence truly begins to dominate. Creatures in the twilight zone have evolved the ability to produce their own light, often in intricate and beautiful patterns. Some emit steady glows, others flash suddenly like signals in the dark. This light is created through chemical reactions inside their bodies, often involving molecules like luciferin and enzymes called luciferase. When combined, they produce cold light, light without heat, a silent glow born from chemistry. And this light serves many purposes. Some animals use it to lure prey. Others use it to confuse predators, releasing bursts of light that distract or disorient. And some use it in a subtle form of camouflage known as counter-illumination. In this strategy, a creature produces light on its underside, matching the faint light coming from above. When viewed from below, the animal becomes almost invisible, blending perfectly into the dim glow. It's a quiet illusion, one that allows life to disappear in plain sight. Another fascinating truth is that many Twilight Zone creatures migrate daily. As night falls above the ocean, they rise toward the surface to feed, taking advantage of the darkness for protection. Then, as daylight returns, they descend back into the depths. This movement, known as vertical migration, involves billions of organisms, making it the largest synchronized movement of life on Earth. And it happens every single day without pause. As you imagine yourself drifting among them, rising and falling with this slow rhythm, you begin to sense how alive this world truly is, even in the fading light. Pressure continues to increase steadily here. At 500 meters below the surface, the pressure is about 50 times greater than at sea level. And yet, the creatures that live here are perfectly adapted to it. Their bodies are often soft, flexible, designed to withstand the immense weight of the water above them. Rigid structures are rare here. Instead, life favors fluidity, adaptability, resilience. Another quiet truth is that food becomes less abundant as you descend. Unlike the surface, where sunlight supports constant production of energy, the twilight zone relies heavily on what drifts down from above. This falling material, often called marine snow, consists of tiny particles, dead plankton, fecal matter, fragments of organic debris, all slowly sinking through the water. It may not sound like much, but for many creatures here, it is a primary source of nourishment. A gentle snowfall, feeding an entire hidden world. Some animals have adapted to this scarcity in remarkable ways. They have slow metabolisms, conserving energy, moving only when necessary. Others have developed large mouths and expandable stomachs, allowing them to consume whatever food they encounter, no matter how rare. In a place where meals are unpredictable, opportunity must never be wasted. As the light continues to fade, another subtle truth emerges. Time feels different here. Without clear day and night cycles, the usual rhythms of life become less defined. Instead, cycles are driven by subtle changes, tiny shifts in light intensity, temperature, or the movement of other organisms. It is a world guided by nuance, by the smallest of signals. And then there are the hunters. Predators in the twilight zone are often equipped with unique adaptations. Some have long, needle-like teeth designed to trap slippery prey. Others have hinged jaws that open wide enough to swallow animals nearly their own size. But perhaps the most striking feature is their use of light. Certain species use bioluminescent lures, small glowing appendages that dangle in front of their mouths, attracting curious prey. In the darkness, even a faint glow can be irresistible. And in that moment of curiosity, the hunter strikes. It is not violent, not chaotic, but precise, silent, efficient. Another truth, often overlooked, is that despite the alien appearance of many twilight creatures, they are deeply connected to the rest of the ocean. Nutrients, energy, and life all flow through this layer, linking the surface to the deep. Without the twilight zone, the deeper ocean would be far less alive. As you drift now, suspended in this dim, shifting world, the last traces of sunlight have nearly disappeared. Above you, only a faint glow remains. Below you, darkness deepens, and around you, small flashes of living light begin to appear more frequently, like distant signals in a vast underwater night. The ocean feels larger now, quieter, endless. And as you continue your descent, the twilight fades slowly, gently, into something deeper still. As you continue to drift deeper, the last fragile traces of natural light dissolve almost completely. What remains is no longer sunlight, but memory of it, a dim, distant glow that feels more imagined than real. You are now fully immersed in the twilight zone, where the boundary between light and darkness quietly disappears. And here, something remarkable becomes clear. Light is no longer something that comes from above. It comes from life itself. Bioluminescence surrounds you now, not constantly, but in soft, unpredictable pulses. A flicker to your left, a faint glow below, a sudden flash that appears and vanishes before you can focus on it. This is the language of the twilight zone, a silent conversation written in light. One quiet truth is that no two species use bioluminescence in exactly the same way. Some produce steady glows, almost like a calm, breathing rhythm. Others flash in rapid bursts, creating patterns that may serve as warnings or signals to potential mates. In some cases, entire schools of organisms will emit light simultaneously, creating waves of illumination that ripple through the water like underwater constellations. It is both beautiful and deeply functional. Another truth is that in this dim world, contrast matters more than color. Since most colors have already vanished, creatures rely on brightness and shadow to perceive their surroundings. Even the faintest difference in light can reveal movement, shape, or danger. This is why many animals here have evolved extremely sensitive vision, tuned not for color, but for detecting the smallest flickers in the dark. Others, however, take a different approach entirely. Some species have developed tubular eyes, elongated structures that point upward, designed specifically to detect silhouettes against the faint glow above. These creatures spend much of their time looking toward the surface, watching for anything that might drift down or swim above them. They live in a constant state of quiet awareness, always observing, always waiting. As you move deeper still, another subtle truth reveals itself. Size becomes unpredictable. In the twilight zone, you may encounter very small organisms drifting like dust, and suddenly, a much larger shape moving silently nearby. Unlike the surface, where size often correlates with dominance, here the rules are less clear. Some small creatures are highly efficient survivors, while some larger ones rely on patience rather than speed. One example of this is the slow, drifting predators that move almost invisibly through the water. They do not chase their prey. Instead, they wait, conserving energy, allowing the currents to bring opportunity to them. It is a different kind of hunting, not urgent, not aggressive, but patient and precise. Another quiet truth is that many Twilight Zone animals are fragile. Their bodies are often soft, gelatinous, almost delicate in appearance. This is not weakness, but adaptation. In a high-pressure, low-energy environment, building heavy or rigid structures would require more resources than are available. So instead, life becomes lighter, more flexible, almost transparent. As you drift among them, you begin to notice how gently everything moves. There is no sudden motion, no sharp bursts of activity. Even when something is hunting, it happens with a kind of calm efficiency. The ocean here does not rush. It flows. Another fascinating truth is that some creatures can control their bioluminescence with incredible precision. They can turn it on or off in an instant, adjust its brightness, even change its pattern. This allows them to communicate in ways we are only beginning to understand. Imagine a world where conversations are not spoken, but seen. Flashes of light carrying meaning through darkness. And yet, for all this quiet beauty, there's also constant tension. Because in the Twilight Zone, visibility is limited and danger can come from any direction. Predators often approach from below, using the faint light above to silhouette their prey. Others rely on sudden bursts of speed, appearing out of the darkness without warning. For prey animals, survival depends on anticipation, on sensing the smallest changes in their environment. A shift in water pressure, a flicker of light, a faint vibration. These are the signals that matter. As you descend closer to 1,000 meters, the twilight fades even further. Light from the surface is now almost entirely gone. And here, another truth becomes clear. You are nearing the edge of a world where sunlight no longer exists at all. But before that transition, the twilight zone offers one final, extraordinary phenomenon. At certain depths and conditions, massive layers of marine life can form what scientists call a deep scattering layer. This is a dense concentration of organisms, fish, squid, and plankton, that can be so thick it reflects sonar signals as if it were the ocean floor. Early explorers once believed they had discovered a false bottom beneath the sea, only to realize it was alive, moving, rising and falling with the daily migration. An entire layer of life, shifting silently through the water. As you imagine yourself drifting alongside it, you feel the scale of this hidden world. Not empty, not lifeless, but filled with quiet movement, constant adaptation, endless change. Another gentle truth is that despite the darkness, this zone is not isolated. It connects everything. Energy flows down from the surface, and life carries it deeper. Creatures that live here serve as both hunters and prey, forming a crucial link in the vast web of the ocean. Without this layer, the deeper zones would struggle to survive. It is a bridge, a transition, a place where two worlds meet. And now, as you continue your slow descent, that bridge begins to fade behind you. The last faint glow of the surface disappears entirely. Darkness, true darkness, begins to take hold. But even here, you are not alone. Around you, small points of light continue to appear, drifting, blinking, glowing softly in the endless water, like stars in a night sky, except closer, quieter, more alive. And as you settle into this deeper calm, one final truth from the twilight zone lingers in your mind. The deeper you go, the less the ocean feels like a place, and the more it feels like a universe. Fushed, silent, infinite, and waiting. Chapter 3. The Midnight Zone of Eternal Darkness. As you continue your slow descent, something profound begins to settle around you. The last traces of light gone. Not dimmed, not faded, but completely absent. You have now entered what is known as the Midnight Zone, or the bathypelagic zone. It begins at around 1,000 meters below the surface and stretches down to nearly 4,000 meters. Here, sunlight does not reach ever. This is a world of permanent night, and yet it is far from empty. One of the first quiet truths of the Midnight Zone is that darkness here is absolute. There is no sunrise, no sunset, no horizon. Direction itself begins to lose meaning. Above and below become abstract ideas rather than visible realities. In this space, light is no longer something you pass through. It is something that appears briefly and then disappears again. Bioluminescence is now everywhere. Not constant, but frequent enough that the darkness feels alive. Small flashes, slow glows, drifting lights that move like distant thoughts. Nearly every creature here has some form of light-producing ability, and in a place without sunlight, this becomes the dominant language of life. Another truth is that the pressure here is immense. At 1,000 meters, the pressure is already about 100 times greater than its sea level. By 3,000 meters, it becomes almost unimaginable. And yet, the creatures that live here are not crushed by it. Their bodies are adapted in ways that allow them to function under this constant weight. Many lack air-filled spaces entirely. No lungs, no swim bladders filled with gas. Instead, their bodies are composed of dense fluids and flexible tissues that compress without damage. They do not resist the pressure. They exist within it. As you drift deeper into this endless night, temperature stabilizes into a cold, steady range, often just a few degrees above freezing. It does not fluctuate much here. There are no seasons, no weather patterns, only a quiet, unchanging chill. And in this stillness, life continues. One of the most fascinating truths about the Midnight Zone is how creatures have adapted to scarcity. Food is rare. There is no photosynthesis, no constant production of energy from sunlight. Everything that exists here depends on what falls from above or what can be captured. This has led to some of the most unusual adaptations on Earth. Many animals have enormous mouths, far larger than their bodies might suggest. Their jaws can unhinge, their stomachs can stretch, allowing them to consume prey much larger than themselves. Because in this world, you may not eat again for a long time. So when food appears, you take everything. Another quiet truth is that many creatures here move very slowly, not out of laziness, but necessity. Every movement requires energy, and energy is precious. Fast, constant swimming would be too costly. Instead, life adopts a rhythm of stillness, punctuated by brief, purposeful motion, a slow drift, a sudden strike, then stillness again. There is no rush, no urgency. The light is soft, inviting, almost gentle. And when something approaches, the anglerfish strikes with sudden precision. It is not aggressive, not chaotic, but efficient. A quiet predator in a silent world. Another truth is that many Midnight Zone creatures have reduced or even absent eyes. In a place where sunlight does not exist, vision becomes less useful. Some species rely entirely on other senses, detecting vibrations, pressure changes, or chemical signals in the water. Others retain their eyes, but use them only to detect bioluminescent signals. Light here is no longer about seeing the environment. It is about seeing each other. As you drift deeper still, you may notice something else. The scale of space. Without light to define boundaries, the ocean feels vast, almost infinite. There are no visible walls, no clear distances. A creature might appear suddenly, close to you or far away, and it can be difficult to tell the difference. This creates a sense of quiet disorientation, but also a strange kind of peace. There is nothing to navigate around, only open water. Another fascinating truth is that some species here are capable of producing red bioluminescence, a rarity in the deep ocean. Most creatures cannot see red light, as it does not travel far underwater. This allows certain predators to illuminate their surroundings in a way that is effectively invisible to their prey. A hidden light, used in secret, is one of the few examples of something resembling stealth technology in nature. As you continue your descent, the darkness feels heavier but not threatening, just deeper, more complete, and yet still alive. Another quiet truth is that despite the harsh conditions, biodiversity remains surprisingly rich. The Midnight Zone is home to countless species, many of which have never been seen by humans. Each one uniquely adapted, each one part of a delicate balance. We often imagine darkness as empty, but here it is full of life, of movement, of silent interaction. And perhaps the most calming truth of all, nothing here is in a hurry. The ocean at this depth does not rush, does not change quickly, does not demand attention. It simply exists in a steady, unbroken rhythm. As you float in this endless night, surrounded by faint glows and slow movement, your thoughts begin to slow as well. The surface world feels distant now, almost unreal. And here, in the quiet darkness, the ocean feels infinite. As you continue drifting deeper into the midnight zone, the darkness no longer feels unfamiliar. Instead, it begins to feel natural. There's a quiet acceptance here, a steady, unchanging environment where nothing depends on sunlight and nothing waits for morning. Time itself seems to lose its edges, blending into a continuous, calm existence. And within this stillness, life carries on in ways both subtle and extraordinary. One of the quieter truths of the midnight zone is how sound behaves in this depth. Without the surface disturbances of waves and wind, the ocean becomes a place of low, steady vibrations. Sounds travel far, but they are often soft, muted, almost distant. A movement from far away can be detected as a faint tremor in the water. For many creatures here, this sensitivity to vibration replaces sight. Specialized organs allow them to sense even the smallest disturbances, the gentle pulse of another animal swimming nearby, or the subtle shift of water displaced by something approaching. In a world without light, awareness becomes a different kind of perception. Another truth is that reproduction in the deep sea follows unusual patterns. Encounters between individuals can be rare. The vastness of the ocean makes it unlikely for members of the same species to cross paths often. So, evolution has shaped unique solutions to this challenge. Some species release eggs and sperm into the water, relying on chance and timing. Others use bioluminescent signals to attract mates across the darkness. And then there are species with far more unusual adaptations. Certain anglerfish species, for example, exhibit a form of permanent attachment between males and females. The much smaller male finds a female, attaches himself to her body, and gradually fuses with her, becoming a part of her system. From that point on, he provides sperm whenever needed, ensuring reproduction without the need to search again. It is a strange, almost surreal solution, but in the deep ocean, it works. Another quiet truth is that life here often appears almost alien. Creatures with elongated bodies, transparent skin, oversized features, and movements that seem slow and deliberate. But these forms are not random. Each feature serves a purpose refined over millions of years to fit this exact environment. Large teeth help secure rare prey. Expandable stomachs allow for infrequent but large meals. Soft bodies reduce energy costs and resist pressure. Everything has meaning. As you drift gently through this world, you begin to notice the spacing between life. Unlike the crowded surface, where fish swim in schools and life clusters densely, the midnight zone feels more solitary. Encounters are rare. Moments of interaction are brief. And then stillness returns. But this does not mean the ocean is empty. It simply means that life here exists at a different pace. Another fascinating truth is that some creatures are capable of producing sudden, intense flashes of light as a defense mechanism. When threatened, they release a burst of bioluminescence into the water, creating a glowing cloud that distracts predators. In that brief moment of confusion, they slip away, a quiet escape in a world of darkness. Others take a different approach. Some species can detach glowing body parts, leaving behind a luminous decoy while they drift silently, into the dark. The predator, drawn to the light, focuses on the discarded piece while the real creature disappears. It is a subtle form of misdirection, almost like a vanishing act. As you continue your descent, another truth reveals itself. The deeper you go, the less life relies on speed. In the absence of light and abundant food, speed becomes less useful. Instead, patience becomes the dominant strategy. Creatures wait, conserve energy, and act only when necessary. This creates a world that feels almost suspended, not frozen, but slowed. Every movement carries intention. Every action has purpose. And in this calm, there is a sense of quiet balance. Another gentle truth is that many deep-sea creatures have very long lifespans. With slower metabolisms and fewer predators, some species can live for decades, even centuries. Time moves differently here, not just in perception, but in biology. Life stretches, unfolds slowly, without urgency. As you drift further, the water feels colder, heavier, but also more peaceful. There is no turbulence, no sudden change. Only a steady, unbroken environment that remains consistent day after day, year after year. And yet, even here, there are moments of surprise. A sudden flash of light, a shape emerging from the darkness, a quiet interaction between predator and prey. These moments are rare, but they carry a certain clarity. In a world with so little stimulation, even the smallest event feels significant. Another truth is that the midnight zone is still largely unexplored. Despite advances in technology, humans have only observed a small fraction of this vast region. There are likely countless species still undiscovered, behaviors still unobserved, mysteries still waiting quietly in the dark. The ocean at this depth remains one of the last true frontiers on Earth. And perhaps that is part of its calm. It exists whether we see it or not, unchanged by attention, unbothered by observation, simply present. As you settle into this deeper stillness, your mind begins to mirror the ocean around you. Thoughts drift more slowly. Breathing becomes steady. The sense of time softens, stretches, fades. And here, surrounded by darkness and gentle pulses of living light, you realize something simple, yet profound. The ocean does not need light to be alive. It does not need noise to be active. It does not need constant change to be meaningful. It simply exists in a quiet, steady rhythm. And as you float here in the calm, endless night, that rhythm begins to feel familiar, comforting, almost like drifting into sleep. Chapter 4: Creatures that glow in the abyss. As you continue your slow descent deeper into the quiet ocean, something begins to stand out more clearly than ever before. Light, not from the sun, not from above, but from life itself. Here in the deep, light is no longer something that fades. It is something that is created. Bioluminescence becomes more than just an occasional flicker. It becomes a defining feature of existence. In fact, scientists estimate that the majority of deep-sea organisms possess some ability to produce light. It is not rare here. It is normal. And yet, each glow tells a different story. One of the most fascinating truths about bioluminescence is that it is not heat-based light like a flame or a bulb. Instead, it is a chemical reaction. Inside specialized cells, compounds such as luciferin react with oxygen, often with the help of an enzyme called luciferase, producing light with almost no heat. This is sometimes called cold light. efficient, silent, and perfectly suited for the deep ocean. As you drift through the darkness, you begin to notice patterns. A soft pulse here, a brief flash there, a slow, steady glow moving in the distance. It feels almost like drifting through a night sky, except the stars are alive. Some creatures use light simply to exist. Others use it to communicate, and some use it to survive. One quiet truth is that bioluminescence can be used as a form of identification. Certain species emit unique patterns of light, specific rhythms or colors that allow them to recognize one another in the darkness. In a world where sight is limited, light becomes a signature, a way of saying, "I am here." Another truth is that some organisms use light defensively. When disturbed, they release sudden flashes or glowing clouds into the water. These bursts of light can startle predators, confuse them, or even attract larger predators that might target the attacker instead. It is a subtle strategy, using light not to fight, but to redirect danger. As you continue drifting, you might notice something else. Not all light is steady. Some creatures produce rapid flashes, almost like signals or codes. Scientists are still trying to understand many of these patterns, but it is believed that they may serve as communication, perhaps to attract mates or to warn others. In the deep ocean, language may not be spoken. It may be seen. Another fascinating truth is that different colors of bioluminescence serve different purposes. Most deep-sea light is blue or green because these wavelengths travel the farthest through water. But some creatures produce red light, a rare ability in the deep. Why red? Because most deep-sea animals cannot see it. This allows certain predators to illuminate their surroundings without being detected. It is like shining a flashlight that only you can see, a hidden advantage in a world built on visibility. As you drift further, you encounter creatures that seem almost designed around their light. The anglerfish, for example, carries a glowing lure that extends from its head. This small, pulsing light attracts curious prey, drawing them closer until it is too late. The light is gentle, almost inviting, but is also a trap. Another creature, the lanternfish, uses light in a completely different way. Its body is lined with small, glowing organs called photophores, arranged in patterns along its sides. These lights can be adjusted in brightness, allowing the fish to blend into the faint light above, a technique known as counter-illumination. From below, it disappears. From above, it is already hidden by darkness. It becomes almost invisible simply by matching the light around it. As you float quietly, observing these subtle strategies, you begin to realize something deeper. Bioluminescence is not just a feature. It is a language, a tool, a way of life. Another quiet truth is that some organisms do not produce light themselves, but instead host bioluminescent bacteria within their bodies. These bacteria live in specialized organs, and in exchange for a safe environment, they produce light for their host. A partnership silent and mutually beneficial. Some squid species, for example, can control these bacteria, dimming or brightening the light as needed. It is a level of control that feels almost deliberate, almost thoughtful. As you drift deeper into this glowing world, you begin to notice how the darkness itself feels different. It is no longer empty. It is filled with possibility. Every shadow might contain a faint glow. Every movement might trigger a flash. It is a living darkness, one that breathes softly with light. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea creatures can produce light in response to touch. When disturbed, they emit a sudden glow, almost like a reflex. This means that movement through the water can create trails of light, brief, shimmering paths that fade as quickly as they appear. Imagine drifting through a space where every motion leaves a glowing trace, a soft echo of your presence. It is both beautiful and fleeting. As you continue your descent, the density of visible life may seem sparse, but the presence of light remains constant. Small, distant glows appear and disappear, never fully revealing their source. And this creates a unique sensation. You are surrounded by life, but you rarely see it completely. Only glimpses, only hints, and yet it feels enough. Another quiet truth is that bioluminescence has evolved independently many times. It is not a single invention, but a repeated solution to the challenges of darkness. Different species, different chemistries, different purposes, all arriving at the same outcome. Light in a world without light. As you drift here, surrounded by these gentle, glowing signals, your thoughts begin to slow even further. The darkness no longer feels heavy. It feels calm, soft, alive, and within it, countless tiny lights continue their quiet dance, illuminating the abyss in ways that feel almost dreamlike. As you continue to drift through this softly glowing darkness, the rhythm of light begins to feel almost familiar. Not predictable, but comforting. Each flicker, each pulse, each distant shimmer feels like part of a quiet conversation happening all around you, one that doesn't need words. And the deeper you go, the more intricate this language of light becomes. One of the more subtle truths of bioluminescence is that it is often carefully controlled. Creatures don't simply glow all the time. Many can activate or suppress their light instantly, depending on the situation. This control allows them to remain hidden when necessary or visible when it serves a purpose. In a place where visibility can mean survival or danger, this ability becomes incredibly important. Some species even possess what could be described as light organs with adjustable shutters, tiny structures that can open or close, regulating how much light escapes into the water. It's a level of precision that feels almost engineered, yet it is entirely natural. As you observe this quiet control, another truth becomes clear. Not all light in the deep ocean is meant to be seen. Some signals are incredibly faint, barely perceptible, meant only for those who know how to look. This creates a kind of selective communication, messages that are visible only to certain species. It is a hidden network, operating silently in the dark. Another fascinating truth is that some organisms use bioluminescence to mimic other creatures. By copying the light patterns of harmless species or even potential prey, they can deceive others into approaching. In the darkness, where identity is often defined by light, imitation becomes a powerful tool. It is a quiet form of disguise, and it works. As you drift deeper into this world, you begin to notice that some glows are not isolated. Entire groups of organisms can illuminate together, creating waves of synchronized light that ripple through the water. These displays can be triggered by movement or by disturbances spreading like a soft chain reaction through the surrounding space. It's almost like watching a living constellation shift and breathe. A gentle reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is coordination, connection, awareness. Another truth is that bioluminescence is not limited to animals. Certain types of deep-sea plankton also produce light, and when disturbed, they can create glowing clouds or trails. In some rare conditions, vast areas of the ocean can shimmer with light, responding to waves, currents, or passing creatures. It is a phenomenon that has been observed even near the surface, but in the deep, it feels more concentrated, more intimate. A quiet glow responding to presence. As you continue drifting, you may notice something else. Some lights move slowly, almost lazily, while others dart quickly, flashing in sharp bursts. This difference often reflects the lifestyle of the creature. Slow, drifting organisms tend to emit steady or pulsing glows. Faster, more active creatures use brief flashes, signals that are quick, efficient, and difficult to track. Every movement, every light has a purpose. Another quiet truth is that in the deep ocean, being seen is not always a disadvantage. In some cases, visibility can serve as a warning. Certain species emit bright, unmistakable flashes when threatened, signaling that they may be toxic or unpalatable. It is a way of saying, "I'm not worth the effort," and often predators listen. As you float in this softly illuminated world, you begin to sense how balanced everything is. Light is not used carelessly. It is measured, intentional, meaningful. Even the smallest glow carries significance. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea creatures can change the color of their bioluminescence. Though rare, this ability allows them to adapt their signals depending on context, whether for communication, camouflage, or hunting. It is a level of flexibility that adds even more complexity to this silent language. And yet, much of it remains a mystery. Scientists have only begun to understand the full range of functions and meanings behind these lights. Many species have never been observed in their natural environment for extended periods. Their signals, their patterns, their behaviors remain largely unknown. There are entire conversations happening in the deep ocean that we have yet to decipher. As you drift deeper still, the density of light begins to thin slightly. Not because there is less life, but because the spacing between encounters increases. Creatures are more spread out, their interactions less frequent. But when light does appear, it feels more significant. A single glow in the distance becomes a focal point. A brief flash captures your full attention. In this way, the deep ocean teaches a quiet lesson, that even the smallest light can feel vast when surrounded by darkness. Another gentle truth is that bioluminescence is one of the most energy-efficient forms of light production known in nature. Almost all the energy used is converted directly into light, with very little wasted as heat. In a place where energy is scarce, efficiency is everything. Nothing is wasted. Everything is optimized. As you continue your descent, the glowing world around you begins to feel less like something separate and more like something you are part of. You're no longer observing it from the outside. You are within it, surrounded by soft pulses, drifting lights, quiet signals that pass by without sound. And in this stillness, your thoughts begin to settle even further. Slower, softer, calmer. The ocean does not demand your attention. It simply invites you to drift, to observe, to exist alongside its quiet rhythms. And here, in the deep, glowing abyss, you realize something simple. Light does not need to be bright to be meaningful. It does not need to last long to be beautiful. Even the smallest flicker can illuminate the darkness just enough, and then gently it fades. Chapter 5: Giants and Ghosts of the Deep Sea. As you continue your slow descent deeper into the vast, quiet ocean, something begins to change once again. The darkness remains. The cold remains. The stillness remains. But now shapes begin to feel larger, more distant, more mysterious. Welcome to a world of giants and ghosts. In the deep ocean, size does not follow the same rules as it does on land. Some creatures are far smaller than expected, while others grow to astonishing proportions, drifting silently through the dark like living shadows. One of the first quiet truths of the deep sea is a phenomenon known as deep sea gigantism. Certain animals, particularly invertebrates, grow much larger in the deep than their relatives in shallower waters. Giant isopods, for example, resemble oversized pill bugs, some reaching lengths of over 30 centimeters. Giant squid, elusive and rarely seen, can extend to lengths of over 10 meters, their long tentacles stretching through the darkness like drifting ribbons. Why this happens is still not fully understood. Some scientists believe it may be related to colder temperatures, which slow metabolism and allow for longer lifespans, leading to larger growth over time. Others suggest that the scarcity of food encourages animals to grow larger, allowing them to store more energy when they do find a meal. Whatever the reason, the result is undeniable. The deep ocean holds creatures of immense scale, moving quietly through endless space. As you drift forward, imagine a shape emerging slowly from the darkness. Not rushing, not hunting, just present. Another truth is that many large deep-sea animals are rarely seen by humans. The giant squid, for instance, remained almost entirely a mystery for centuries. It was known mainly from washed-up remains, fragments of tentacles, stories told by sailors. It wasn't until the early 21st century that scientists were able to capture clear images of a giant squid in its natural habitat. Even now, sightings are rare, and so these creatures retain an almost mythical quality, existing somewhere between science and imagination. Another quiet truth is that not all deep-sea giants are fast or powerful. Some are slow, drifting, almost passive. The giant siphonophores, for example, are colonial organisms made up of many smaller units working together as one. Some species can grow to lengths of over 40 meters, making them among the longest animals on Earth. They do not chase prey. They simply drift, extending long, delicate tentacles that capture passing organisms. A quiet giant, feeding slowly in the dark. As you continue your descent, the idea of ghosts begins to take shape. Not in the sense of something supernatural, but something that appears and disappears without warning. Many deep-sea creatures are translucent or pale, their bodies blending almost perfectly with the surrounding water. Without light, color becomes meaningless. Instead, form and movement define presence. Some creatures seem to materialize out of nowhere, their faint outlines barely visible before fading again into the darkness. It creates a sense of something watching, something passing by just beyond clear perception. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea animals are known as gelatinous zooplankton, organisms with soft, jelly-like bodies that drift with the currents. These include certain types of jellyfish, comb jellies, and salps. Their movements are slow, graceful, almost hypnotic. They pulse gently through the water, leaving no trace behind. And in the darkness, their transparency makes them appear almost ghost-like. As you imagine yourself floating among them, you begin to understand why early explorers described the deep ocean as a place of spirits and shadows. Not because it is haunted, but because it feels otherworldly. Another quiet truth is that some of the largest creatures in the deep ocean are not predators at all. The sperm whale, for example, is one of the deepest diving mammals on Earth. It can descend to depths of over 2,000 meters in search of squid, holding its breath for more than an hour. Despite its size, it moves with calm precision, navigating the darkness using echolocation. Sound becomes its guide. Clicks echo through the water, returning information about the shape and distance of objects ahead. In a world without light, this is how it sees. Another truth is that encounters in the deep sea are often brief. A large creature may appear suddenly, illuminated for a moment by faint bioluminescence, and then vanish just as quickly. There is no lingering, no extended observation, only glimpses, and this adds to the mystery. You never see the full picture, only fragments. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea creatures exhibit a phenomenon known as gigantothermy, a condition where large body size helps retain heat. In the cold depths, this can be an advantage, allowing animals to maintain slightly higher internal temperatures than the surrounding water. It is a subtle form of adaptation, but one that can influence survival. As you drift deeper, you begin to notice how space itself feels different. In the absence of light, distances are hard to judge. A massive creature might be close or far away, and it can be difficult to tell. This creates a sense of scale that is both vast and intimate at the same time. You are surrounded by emptiness, and yet something could be just beside you. Another quiet truth is that some deep-sea animals have elongated forms, long bodies, trailing appendages, extended fins. These shapes allow them to move efficiently through the water, conserving energy while maintaining balance. They do not need speed, they need efficiency. And in this calm, drifting world, efficiency is everything. As you continue your descent, the idea of giants and ghosts begins to blend together. Large shapes move slowly through the darkness, while smaller, translucent forms drift quietly nearby. Everything feels distant, softened, almost dreamlike. And yet, it is all real. Another truth is that the deep ocean challenges our sense of familiarity. Creatures do not resemble what we expect. Movements do not follow patterns we recognize. Even scale becomes uncertain. And in this unfamiliarity, there's a kind of quiet wonder. As you float here, surrounded by shadows and slow movement, your mind begins to relax into the unknown. There is no need to understand everything. No need to see clearly. Only to drift. Only to observe. Only to exist in this vast, silent world where giants move like whispers and ghosts drift like thoughts, fading gently into the endless dark. As you continue to drift deeper, surrounded by slow-moving shadows and vast, open darkness, the presence of giants begins to feel less surprising and more like a natural part of this world. They do not dominate the ocean. They belong to it quietly without disturbance. And yet, their existence carries a quiet sense of awe. One of the gentler truths about deep-sea giants is that many of them are not aggressive. Despite their size, they do not constantly hunt or pursue. Instead, they move slowly, conserving energy, taking advantage of rare opportunities when they appear. In a place where food is scarce, patience becomes more valuable than power. Even a massive colossal squid, one of the largest invertebrates known, is believed to spend much of its time drifting quietly through the depths. With enormous eyes, some of the largest in the animal kingdom, it is adapted to detect faint movements and distant light in near total darkness. Its size is not just for strength, but for perception, to see where almost nothing can be seen. Another quiet truth is that many large deep-sea animals remain mysterious not because they are rare, but because they're difficult to observe. The vastness of the ocean, combined with the absence of light, makes encounters unpredictable and fleeting. Even with modern technology, much of what we know comes from brief recordings, fragments of observation, glimpses captured in the dark. It is a reminder that there are still parts of our own planet that remain largely unknown. As you drift gently forward, you may begin to notice something else. Some of these ghost-like creatures are not truly invisible, but they behave in ways that make them feel that way. They move slowly, often with the current, avoiding sudden motion. Their bodies reflect little light or emit just enough to blend in. They do not announce their presence. They simply pass by, and then they are gone. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea organisms are so delicate that bringing them to the surface can destroy them. The change in pressure causes their bodies to collapse, their structures unable to withstand the difference. This means that many species can only truly exist in their natural depth. They are creatures of a specific world, bound to it completely. As you imagine observing them in their true environment, untouched by disturbance, there is a quiet sense of respect that begins to form. This is their space, and it remains largely undisturbed. Another truth is that not all giants are solitary. Some large organisms exist as colonies, groups of smaller units working together as a single entity. These colonies can stretch across great distances, forming structures that drift through the water like living threads. Each individual part has a role. Together, they become something much larger. It is a form of life that challenges the idea of individuality, where one organism ends and another begins becomes difficult to define. As you continue drifting, you begin to sense how fluid the concept of form is in the deep ocean. Shapes are not fixed. Boundaries are not clear. Everything feels adaptable, shifting, almost weightless. Another quiet truth is that the deep ocean can create illusions of scale. Without reference points, a small creature close to you might appear large, while a massive animal in the distance may seem small. Light, when it appears, does not travel far enough to provide context. This creates a sense of uncertainty, but also wonder. You are never quite sure what you're seeing, and perhaps that is part of the experience. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea fish have evolved extremely elongated fins or trailing filaments that extend far beyond their bodies. These structures may help them sense their surroundings, detect movement, or attract prey. They move gently with the water, like threads in a slow current, almost invisible until they are not. As you drift deeper, the distinction between creature and environment begins to blur. Some organisms resemble drifting debris. Others mimic the faint glow of distant light. Camouflage here is not about hiding behind something, but becoming something else entirely. a shadow, a flicker, a suggestion. Another quiet truth is that even large predators in the deep ocean often rely on stealth rather than speed. Sudden bursts of motion are rare. Instead, they approach slowly, carefully, using darkness as their cover. When they strike, it is quick, precise, and silent. There is no chaos, only efficiency. As you float in this calm, shadow-filled space, you may begin to notice how your own sense of movement has slowed. There is no urgency here, no pressure to act, only the gentle rhythm of drifting, observing, existing. And within this rhythm, even the largest creatures feel peaceful. Another truth is that the deep ocean does not separate life into categories as clearly as we do. What we call a giant is simply a part of the ecosystem. What we call a ghost is simply a form of adaptation. There is no hierarchy here, only balance. As you continue your descent, the presence of these immense and mysterious beings becomes less intimidating and more calming. They move slowly. They act deliberately. They exist without excess. And in that, there's something deeply soothing. Another gentle truth is that the ocean at this depth does not change quickly. Generations of creatures live and pass without dramatic shifts in their environment. The same cold, the same darkness, the same quiet patterns continue over time. It is a place of stability, of consistency, of quiet continuity. As you drift now, surrounded by faint shapes and distant movement, your thoughts begin to mirror this stillness. Slower, quieter, more at ease. The idea of giants no longer feels overwhelming. The idea of ghosts no longer feels uncertain. They are simply part of the ocean's story, and you are gently drifting through it. No need to rush. No need to understand everything. Only to feel the calm, the depth, the quiet presence of life that moves like a whisper through the endless dark. Chapter 6: Pressure, Cold, and Survival Extremes. As you continue your slow descent deeper into the quiet, endless ocean, something invisible begins to define everything around you. Pressure. You cannot see it. You cannot hear it. And yet, it is always there, gently, constantly pressing in from all directions. In the deep ocean, pressure increases steadily with depth. For every 10 meters you descend, the pressure rises by about 1 atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, it is already around 100 times greater than what you experience at sea level. And deeper still, it becomes almost unimaginable. But here is the quiet truth. To the creatures that live here, this pressure is not extreme. It is normal. Their bodies are not resisting it. They are built for it. One of the most fascinating adaptations is the absence of air spaces. Many deep-sea organisms lack lungs, gas-filled swim bladders, or any internal pockets of air that could be compressed under pressure. Instead, their bodies are composed of water-rich tissues and fluids that remain stable regardless of depth. They do not collapse. They remain balanced no matter how deep they go. Another quiet truth is that proteins and enzymes inside these creatures are specially adapted to function under high pressure. In most surface organisms, extreme pressure would disrupt cellular processes, causing proteins to lose their shape and stop working. But deep-sea life has evolved molecular structures that remain stable, even under immense weight. It is adaptation at the smallest level. As you drift deeper, the cold becomes more noticeable. Temperatures in much of the deep ocean hover just above freezing, typically between 0 and 4 degrees Celsius. Unlike the surface, where sunlight warms the water and creates variation, the deep ocean remains consistently cold. There are no warm afternoons, no seasonal shifts, only a steady, quiet chill. And yet, life continues. Another gentle truth is that cold temperatures slow everything down. Metabolism decreases. Movement becomes more deliberate. Growth often takes longer. But this is not a disadvantage. It is part of the balance. Slower metabolism means less energy is required. And in a place where food is limited, this becomes essential. As you float in this cold, silent world, you begin to feel how still everything is. Nothing rushes. Nothing changes suddenly. Only a steady, continuous presence. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea creatures produce natural antifreeze proteins. These compounds prevent ice crystals from forming inside their bodies, allowing them to survive in near-freezing water without damage. It is a quiet defense, invisible but vital. Without it, life here would not be possible. As you continue drifting, another subtle truth emerges. The deeper you go, the more stable the environment becomes. Near the surface, the ocean is influenced by weather, sunlight, and seasonal change. But in the deep, these factors no longer reach. There are no storms, no wobs, no shifting temperatures, only calm and consistency. This stability has shaped life in unique ways. Creatures here are often highly specialized, adapted to very specific conditions that rarely change. They do not need to adjust quickly because their world remains steady. And in that steadiness, there's a kind of quiet peace. Another truth is that oxygen levels can vary significantly in the deep ocean. Some regions, known as oxygen minimum zones, contain very little dissolved oxygen. Yet, certain species have adapted to survive even in these conditions. They extract oxygen more efficiently or reduce their activity to conserve it. Breathing becomes slower, more deliberate. Another fascinating detail is that the density of water increases slightly with depth due to pressure and temperature changes. This affects buoyancy, the way objects float or sink. Many deep-sea organisms have neutral buoyancy, meaning they neither sink nor rise. They can hover effortlessly in the water, expending almost no energy to maintain their position. It is a form of stillness built into their very structure. As you imagine yourself drifting alongside them, weightless, suspended in the cold darkness, you begin to feel how calm this state can be. No effort, no resistance, just floating. Another quiet truth is that the deep ocean experiences very little disturbance. Currents exist, but they are often slow and steady. There are no sudden gusts of wind, no crashing waves, no abrupt movements. Everything flows gently, and within this gentle flow, life adapts. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea organisms can survive extreme pressure changes, at least for short periods. Certain species are known to migrate vertically, moving between depths with different pressure levels. Their bodies are flexible enough to handle these transitions without damage. It is a kind of resilience built into their design. As you continue your descent, the weight of the ocean above becomes greater, but the feeling of calm deepens as well. There is no struggle here, no tensión, only adaptation, only balance. Another truth is that the deep ocean plays a crucial role in regulating Earth's climate. Cold, dense water sinks and flows through the depths, forming part of a global circulation system that moves heat around the planet. This slow movement of water, sometimes called the global conveyor belt, helps stabilize temperatures across the Earth. Even in its stillness, the deep ocean is connected to everything. As you drift further, you begin to notice how your own thoughts have slowed. The steady pressure, the cold, the quiet, all create a sense of calm that feels almost natural. There is no urgency, no need to act, only to exist within the same gentle rhythm as the ocean itself. And here, in this world of pressure and cold, survival is not about strength. It is about adaptation. Subtle, quiet, endlessly effective. As you continue to drift deeper into this calm, pressure-filled world, the sensation of weight becomes something almost abstract. You're surrounded by it, held within it, and yet there is no struggle. Because here, everything has learned not to resist, but to adapt. One of the quietest truths of the deep ocean is that survival is not about dominance, but about efficiency. Nothing is wasted. Every movement, every function, every adaptation is shaped by the need to conserve energy in an environment where resources are limited and conditions remain constant. Even at the cellular level, life has adjusted. Deep-sea organisms possess membranes that remain flexible despite the cold and pressure. In most surface animals, cell membranes can become rigid in low temperatures, making it difficult for cells to function properly. But here, specialized lipids keep these membranes fluid, allowing life to continue uninterrupted. It is a subtle adjustment, but one that makes survival possible. Another fascinating truth is that many deep-sea species have reduced skeletal structures. Bones, where they exist, are often less dense, lighter, and more flexible. This reduces the energy required to build and maintain them, and allows the body to better withstand pressure. In some cases, skeletons are almost absent altogether. Instead, structure is maintained through water itself. As you float quietly, observing this balance between form and environment, another truth becomes clear. The deep ocean does not reward excess. It rewards simplicity. Creatures here do not evolve unnecessary features. Everything serves a purpose. Everything contributes to survival. And in that simplicity, there's a kind of quiet elegance. Another gentle truth is that some organisms have adapted to survive long periods without food. Certain deep-sea animals can go weeks, months, or even longer without eating, slowing their metabolism to conserve energy. When food does appear, they respond quickly, but in its absence, they wait. Patiently, calmly, without urgency. As you drift deeper, this patience begins to feel almost natural. There's no need to rush, no need to search constantly, only to exist and respond when the moment comes. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea bacteria and microorganisms thrive in conditions that would be impossible for most life forms. They can survive not only high pressure and low temperatures, but also extreme chemical environments. These microorganisms form the foundation of certain deep-sea ecosystems, supporting life in ways that are not immediately visible. Even in the most extreme conditions, life finds a way to persist. Another quiet truth is that pressure affects not only physical structures, but also chemical reactions. In the deep ocean, reactions can occur differently than they do at the surface. This influences how organisms process nutrients, how they generate energy, and how their bodies function overall. Everything is adjusted to match the environment. As you continue your slow descent, the sense of stillness deepens. There are no sudden changes, no disruptions, only a steady, unbroken existence. And within that, life continues with quiet precision. Another truth is that some deep-sea fish have extremely low muscle mass. This may seem surprising, but in a place where speed is rarely needed, maintaining large muscles would require unnecessary energy. Instead, their bodies are designed for minimal effort, slow movement, gentle drifting, efficient survival. As you imagine moving through this space without resistance, without urgency, it becomes clear how different this world is from the one above. Here, less is more. Another fascinating detail is that some organisms rely on chemical cues to locate food or other creatures. In the absence of light, chemical signals become a reliable way to sense the environment. Tiny changes in water composition, invisible to us, can guide movement and behavior. It is a different kind of awareness, one that does not rely on sight, but on presence. Another quiet truth is that the deep ocean stability allows for long-term balance. Ecosystems here can remain relatively unchanged for long periods of time. While the surface world experiences constant variation, the deep remains steady. This does not mean it is unchanging, but that change happens slowly over extended periods. It is a place of gradual evolution, of quiet persistence. As you drift further, the cold feels less like discomfort and more like a constant background, something that simply exists. The pressure no longer feels heavy. It feels supportive, holding everything in place, maintaining balance. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea creatures produce substances that help stabilize their proteins under pressure. These compounds act almost like molecular supports, ensuring that essential processes continue even in extreme conditions. It is adaptation at a level we cannot see, but one that defines life here. As you float in this calm, unchanging environment, another realization begins to settle in. The deep ocean is not hostile. It is simply different. What seems extreme to us is normal here. What feels harsh is balanced. Life has not just survived these conditions. It has embraced them. Another quiet truth is that even the slow movement of deep ocean currents plays a role in shaping this world. Nutrients are carried gently through the water, connecting distant regions, supporting life across vast distances. Everything is linked. Even in stillness, there is flow. As you continue drifting, your thoughts begin to mirror the environment around you. Steady, calm, unhurried. There is no pressure to think quickly, no need to respond. Only a gentle awareness of being present. And here in this cold, quiet, high-pressure world, survival is not about overcoming. It is about aligning, adapting, existing in harmony with the conditions that surround you. And as you settle deeper into this understanding, the ocean feels less like a place of extremes and more like a place of balance. Endless, silent, perfectly at ease. Chapter 7: Deep Ocean Currents and Hidden Rivers. As you continue your slow descent deeper into the vast, silent ocean, something begins to reveal itself. Not through sight, not through sound, but through movement. In simple terms, colder, salter water becomes denser and sinks, while warmer, less salty water rises. This creates a slow but powerful cycle. moving water from the surface to the depths and eventually back again. But here in the deep, you do not feel it as a current rushing past. You feel it as a presence, a slow, steady drift, almost like breathing. Another quiet truth is that some of this deep water can take centuries, even thousands of years to complete its journey. Water that sinks in the North Atlantic, for example, may travel through the deep ocean for hundreds of years before rising again in another part of the world. It is a time scale that feels almost unimaginable, a current that outlives generations. As you drift gently with this invisible flow, you begin to sense how connected the ocean truly is. There are no isolated regions, no separate parts. Everything is linked through these slow, continuous movements. Another fascinating truth is that underwater rivers can form due to differences in salinity and density. In certain areas, denser water flows along the ocean floor, creating currents that behave much like rivers on land. They have direction, they have boundaries, they even carve paths over time. One of the most well-known examples is in the Gibraltar Strait, where dense, salty water from the Mediterranean flows into the Atlantic, sinking beneath the less salty water and forming a deep, underwater current. It is a river hidden beneath another ocean. As you imagine yourself drifting alongside it, you feel the quiet strength of this movement. Not fast, not forceful, but persistent. Another truth is that these deep currents play a critical role in distributing nutrients. As water moves, it carries with it tiny particles, organic matter, minerals, and dissolved substances that support life in the depths. Without these currents, many deep-sea ecosystems would struggle to survive. They are not just movements of water, they are lifelines. Another gentle truth is that currents can influence the behavior of deep-sea creatures. Some species position themselves within these flows, allowing the current to bring food to them. Others use it as a means of travel, drifting long distances without expending energy. It is a form of passive movement guided by the ocean itself. As you float quietly, you begin to feel how effortless this can be. No need to swim, no need to push, only to drift and be carried. Another fascinating detail is that underwater currents can interact with the seafloor, creating complex patterns of movement. When these currents encounter underwater mountains, ridges, or trenches, they are redirected, slowed, or intensified. This creates zones of turbulence and zones of calm. Even in the deep, the landscape shapes the flow. Another quiet truth is that some currents are so stable. They form consistent pathways that persist over long periods of time. These pathways can influence where certain species live, where nutrients accumulate, and how ecosystems develop. They are like invisible highways, guiding life through the darkness. As you drift deeper into this awareness, the idea of the ocean as a static space begins to fade. Instead, it feels dynamic, alive, flowing. Another truth is that temperature differences in the deep ocean are subtle, but important. Even small variations can influence the movement of water, creating slow currents that shift over time. These changes are not dramatic. They are gradual, almost unnoticeable. But over long periods, they shape the entire system. As you continue your descent, you may begin to sense a gentle movement around you. Not strong enough to push you, but enough to guide you. A slow drift in a particular direction. This is the current. Silent, invisible, constant. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea currents carry oxygen-rich water from the surface down into the depths. This helps sustain life in regions where oxygen might otherwise be limited. It is a quiet exchange, a connection between worlds. The surface and the deep linked through movement. As you float within this flow, you begin to feel how everything is connected. The warmth of the sun above, the cold of the depths below, all part of a single, continuous system. Another gentle truth is that these currents also play a role in storing carbon. The deep ocean acts as a vast reservoir, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and transporting it into the depths. This process helps regulate Earth's climate, maintaining balance over long periods. Even in its stillness, the ocean is active, always working quietly beneath the surface. As you drift further, the concept of direction begins to soften. There is no clear path, no fixed destination, only movement, only flow. And within that flow, a sense of calm. Because here, you do not need to control where you're going. The ocean carries you, gently, endlessly. And as you settle into this slow, steady rhythm, you begin to understand one of the deepest truths of the ocean. That even in complete stillness, there is motion. And even in silence, there is movement. As you continue to drift, carried gently by currents you cannot see, the ocean begins to feel less like a place and more like a process. A slow, continuous unfolding. Water moving through water. Time moving through time. And within this movement, there are patterns. Not sharp or obvious, but steady and enduring. One of the quiet truths of the deep ocean is that some currents are shaped not only by temperature and salinity, but by the rotation of the Earth itself. This effect, known as the Coriolis force, gently bends the path of moving water, creating slow, curved flows that span entire ocean basins. These currents do not travel in straight lines. They arc gradually, following the shape of the planet. It is a movement influenced by something far beyond the ocean itself. As you drift within this curved flow, you begin to sense how vast these systems truly are. They are not local. They are global. Another fascinating truth is that deep ocean currents can take on layered structures. Water at different depths may move in slightly different directions or at different speeds, creating a complex, multi-layered flow. It is almost like multiple rivers stacked on top of each other, each moving in its own quiet way. And yet, they remain part of the same whole. Another gentle truth is that some of the slowest currents in the ocean are also the most important. These deep flows may move only a few centimeters per second, barely noticeable in the moment, but over time, they transport enormous volumes of water across the globe. It is a reminder that speed is not required for impact. Slow movement can still shape the world. As you continue drifting, you may begin to notice subtle changes in the water around you. A slight shift in temperature, a faint difference in density. These are the boundaries between different water masses, regions of the ocean with distinct characteristics. They do not form sharp edges, but gentle transitions. And as you pass through them, you feel the ocean change, softly, gradually. Another quiet truth is that these boundaries can act as pathways for life. Certain organisms prefer specific conditions, particular temperatures, salinity levels, or nutrient concentrations. As a result, they tend to gather along these transitions, forming invisible corridors of life. It is a kind of natural alignment, where environment and biology meet. Another fascinating detail is that underwater currents can carry sound over long distances. Certain layers of the ocean, known as sound channels, allow sound waves to travel efficiently, sometimes across entire ocean basins. This means that a sound made in one region can be heard far away, carried by the structure of the water itself. In a world without light, this becomes a powerful form of connection. As you drift through this quiet space, imagine distant echoes traveling alongside you, moving through the same currents, linking distant parts of the ocean in ways that are not immediately visible. Another truth is that deep ocean currents can influence the distribution of heat across the planet. While surface currents are more directly affected by wind and sunlight, deep currents play a slower but equally important role in balancing temperature differences. They store cold water. They release it gradually. And in doing so, they help stabilize Earth's climate. It is a quiet function, but a vital one. As you float gently within this flow, you begin to feel how stable everything is. There are no sudden changes, no abrupt shifts, only a slow, continuous movement that unfolds over time. Another gentle truth is that currents can shape the seafloor itself. Over long periods, the movement of water can erode certain areas, deposit sediments in others, and create patterns that reflect the flow of the ocean. Even in the deepest parts, the landscape is not fixed. It evolves slowly, guided by the movement of water. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea organisms are specifically adapted to life within these currents. They position themselves in ways that maximize exposure to flowing nutrients, extending feeding structures into the water, capturing particles as they pass by. They do not chase food. They allow it to come to them. It is a strategy of patience, perfectly suited to a world of slow movement. As you drift alongside them, you begin to understand how effortless this can be. To simply exist within the flow, allowing the environment to provide. Another quiet truth is that even the smallest particles in the ocean, tiny fragments of organic matter, are carried by these currents. Over time, they settle, forming layers on the seafloor, contributing to the slow accumulation of sediment. This process happens continuously, quietly, without interruption. A gentle settling over centuries. As you continue your descent, the sense of direction fades even further. You're no longer moving down or forward. You're simply drifting, carried by forces that are vast, yet gentle. Another fascinating truth is that changes in global climate can influence deep ocean currents. Variations in temperature and salinity at the surface can alter the formation of dense water, which in turn affects the entire circulation system. It is a reminder that even the deepest parts of the ocean are connected to what happens above. Nothing is truly separate. Everything is linked. As you float in this slow, steady flow, your thoughts begin to mirror the movement around you. Soft, continuous, unhurried. There is no need to control anything. No need to decide where to go. The ocean moves, and you move with it. And within that movement, there's a quiet sense of trust. Another gentle truth is that the deep ocean does not rush to reach a destination. It moves because movement is part of its nature. And in that, there's something deeply calming. As you settle into this understanding, the idea of hidden rivers becomes clearer. They're not separate from the ocean. They're the ocean in motion. Invisible pathways carrying life, energy, and connection through the depths. And as you drift along one of these quiet currents surrounded by darkness and soft, steady flow, you realize something simple. You're not lost. You're being carried, gently, endlessly, through a world that never truly stands still. Chapter 8: Underwater Mountains, Trenches, and Volcanoes. As you continue your slow descent, carried gently through the quiet currents of the deep, something begins to take shape beneath you. At first, it is only a suggestion, a faint rise, a subtle shadow against the endless darkness. But as you drift closer, the ocean floor begins to reveal itself. Not flat, not empty, but vast and filled with structure. The deep ocean is not a featureless void. It is a landscape, one shaped by forces that move slowly, but with immense power. And one of the quietest truths about this hidden world is that it is more dramatic than any land above the surface. Beneath the ocean, there are mountains taller than Everest, trenches deeper than anything on Earth's surface, and volcanoes that continue to reshape the planet from below. Immense. One fascinating truth is that there are tens of thousands of seamounts scattered across the ocean floor, many of which have never been explored. Each one is like an isolated world with its own ecosystem, its own patterns of life. As currents flow around them, they create zones of upwelling, bringing nutrients from the depths to higher levels. This supports life in ways that might not otherwise be possible in the surrounding water. In this way, a mountain becomes a source of life, a quiet anchor in the drifting ocean. Another gentle truth is that seamounts can influence the movement of water. As currents encounter these structures, they are redirected, slowed, or intensified. This creates areas where nutrients accumulate, attracting fish, invertebrates, and other marine life. Even in the deep, geography shapes biology. As you imagine yourself drifting alongside one of these vast underwater mountains, its slopes fading into darkness above and below, you begin to feel the scale of it. There are no trees, no visible landmarks, only a gradual rise, disappearing into shadow. Another fascinating truth is that some seamounts are actually extinct volcanoes, remnants of ancient activity that shaped the ocean floor millions of years ago. Rounded, smooth formations that stack upon one another, creating the foundation of new oceanic crust. It is a slow, continuous process, the ocean floor being created even now. Another quiet truth is that these underwater volcanic regions are often associated with hydrothermal vents, openings in the seafloor where heated, mineral-rich water is released. These vents can reach temperatures of over 300 degrees Celsius, yet the surrounding water remains cold. It is a contrast that feels almost impossible, and yet it exists. As you drift closer to one of these vent systems, you might imagine dark plumes rising slowly into the water, clouds of minerals that shimmer faintly in the darkness. These are sometimes called black smokers, and around them, life thrives. Another fascinating truth is that hydrothermal vents support ecosystems that do not rely on sunlight at all. Instead of photosynthesis, these systems are based on chemosynthesis, a process where microorganisms convert chemicals from the vent fluids into energy. These microorganisms form the base of an entire food web, supporting creatures like tube worms, clams, and shrimp that exist nowhere else. Life without light, sustained entirely by the Earth's internal energy. As you drift quietly through this alien landscape, you begin to feel how different this world truly is. These are long, narrow depressions in the seafloor, formed where tectonic plates collide and one is forced beneath another. It is alive in its own way. As you drift gently above this vast terrain, you begin to sense how complex it is. Mountains rising, valleys descending, ridges stretching across great distances, all hidden beneath kilometers of water. Another gentle truth is that we have mapped only a small portion of the ocean floor in detail. Much of it remains unexplored, its features known only through rough estimates and distant measurements. There are entire landscapes still waiting to be seen. As you continue your slow descent, the presence of the seafloor becomes more defined, yet still mysterious. Shapes emerge, then fade. Contours shift, then disappear into shadow. And within this quiet, hidden world, the ocean reveals one of its deepest truths, that beneath the surface, there is an entire planet waiting silently in the dark. As you continue drifting closer now to the silent terrain of the ocean floor, the vastness of this hidden landscape begins to feel almost endless. What once seemed like empty darkness now reveals depth, structure, and quiet complexity. You're no longer just floating in water. You're moving above a world shaped not by wind or sunlight, but by forces deep within the earth itself. One of the most calming truths about the ocean floor is how slowly it changes. Unlike the surface, where storms can reshape coastlines in hours, the deep evolves over thousands, even millions of years. Mountains rise gradually, trenches deepen slowly, volcanic rock forms layer by layer. Everything here moves at a pace that feels almost timeless. As you drift gently above a ridge, you begin to notice how these underwater mountains are often part of vast chains, stretching across entire ocean basins. One of the most significant of these is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a continuous mountain range that runs through the Atlantic Ocean, marking the boundary between tectonic plates. Here, new ocean floor is constantly being formed. There's something almost hypnotic about this descent. The way the ground seems to fall away, the way the darkness deepens, the way the sense of scale becomes harder to grasp. Another quiet truth is that trenches are not perfectly smooth. They are filled with ridges, ledges, and sediment that has slowly accumulated over time. Fine particles drift down from above, settling gently into the depths, creating layers that record the passage of time. Each layer, a quiet memory of what once was. As you imagine descending further into this trench, the pressure increases, the temperature remains steady, and the silence becomes even more complete. And yet life remains. Small organisms move across the sediment, feeding on what is settled, adapting to conditions that would seem impossible elsewhere. It is a reminder that life does not require comfort. It requires balance. Another fascinating truth is that some trenches are sites of intense geological activity. Earthquakes can occur here, not felt on the surface in obvious ways, but part of the ongoing movement of tectonic plates. The Earth, shifting slowly beneath the ocean. A constant, quiet motion. As you drift along the edge of this immense depth, another feature begins to emerge. Hydrothermal vent fields scattered across the seafloor, releasing plumes of mineral-rich water into the ocean. These vents create localized environments that are unlike anything else on Earth. Warm, chemically rich, and filled with life. Another gentle truth is that these vent ecosystems are isolated. They exist in small patches separated by vast distances of empty seafloor. Each one develops its own community of organisms adapted specifically to its conditions. It is like a series of hidden oases in an otherwise barren landscape. As you float near one of these vents, you might imagine tall, tube-like organisms clustered around it, their forms swaying gently in the current. These are tube worms, creatures that have no mouths, no digestive systems, and yet thrive in this environment. They rely entirely on symbiotic bacteria living inside their bodies, bacteria that convert the chemicals from the vent into energy. It is a form of life that challenges everything we expect. No sunlight, no traditional feeding, and yet it works. Another fascinating truth is that underwater volcanoes can erupt without warning, though the effects are often contained within the depths. Lava flows slowly across the seafloor, reshaping the landscape, creating new structures. And then, over time, life returns. It always does. As you drift away from the vent, back into the colder, darker surroundings, the contrast becomes clear. Warmth fades, light disappears, and yet the memory of that brief, vibrant ecosystem remains. Another quiet truth is that the ocean floor is not just rock and sediment. It is also a record, a history of Earth's past, preserved in layers of material that have settled over millions of years. By studying these layers, scientists can learn about ancient climates, past life, and changes in the planet over time. The deep ocean holds memories, silent, undisturbed, waiting. As you continue drifting, the terrain begins to level out slightly. The dramatic slopes give way to broader, flatter regions known as abyssal plains. These plains are some of the most expansive areas on Earth, stretching across vast distances with minimal variation. And yet, even here, there is life. Small creatures move slowly across the sediment, leaving faint trails that mark their passage. Nothing hurried, nothing wasted, only quiet movement across an endless floor. Another gentle truth is that despite its scale, the ocean floor remains one of the least explored regions of our planet. We have seen more of distant planets than we have of this world beneath the water. There are mountains, valleys, ecosystems still waiting to be discovered. As you drift now, just above this silent landscape, you begin to feel how grounded everything is. After the vast openness of the water above, the presence of the seafloor brings a different kind of calm, a sense of place, a sense of quiet stability. And within this stillness, the ocean reveals one more simple truth, that even in the deepest, darkest parts of the world, there is structure, there is form, there is a quiet, enduring presence shaped by time and held in silence. And as you float here above mountains, trenches, and ancient volcanic ground, your thoughts settle gently into that same steady calm. Chapter 9. Strange Ecosystems Without Sunlight. As you continue your slow, gentle descent, now moving along the quiet stretches of the deep ocean floor, something begins to feel different again. Not in the darkness, not in the cold, not even in the stillness, but in the way life exists. Because here, in the deepest parts of the ocean, there are ecosystems that do not depend on sunlight at all. No dawn, no dusk, no photosynthesis. And yet, life thrives. This is one of the most profound truths of the deep ocean, that life does not require light to exist, only energy in whatever form it can find. And here, that energy comes from the earth itself. One of the most fascinating examples of this is found around hydrothermal vents, those openings in the seafloor where superheated, mineral-rich water flows out into the ocean. We've touched on them before, but now we begin to understand them more deeply. Because around these vents, entire ecosystems exist completely independent of the sun. At the heart of these systems are microorganisms, tiny bacteria that perform a process known as chemosynthesis. Instead of using sunlight to produce energy, these bacteria use chemicals such as hydrogen sulfide, which is released from the vents. Through this process, they create organic matter, forming the base of an entire food web. Life built on chemistry instead of light. Another quiet truth is that these ecosystems can be incredibly dense. In the vast emptiness of the deep ocean, hydrothermal vents are like islands of life. Tube worms, clams, shrimp, and other organisms gather in large numbers around these vents, forming communities that feel almost vibrant despite the darkness. It is a concentration of life in an otherwise sparse world. As you imagine drifting closer to one of these vent systems, you might see tall, white tube worms extending upward, their soft plumes gently waving in the current. These organisms, known as Riftia pachyptila, can grow over 2 meters long, and yet they have no mouth, no stomach, no digestive system at all. Instead, they rely entirely on symbiotic bacteria living inside their bodies. These bacteria perform chemosynthesis, providing nutrients directly to the worm. It is a complete partnership, one organism living through another. Another fascinating truth is that these ecosystems can form quickly. When a new vent opens, life can begin to colonize it within months. Larvae drifting through the ocean detect chemical signals from the vent, guiding them to the source. And slowly, a new community forms. In darkness, in heat, in silence. Another gentle truth is that hydrothermal vents are not permanent. They can become inactive over time, their flow of chemicals stopping, their heat fading. When this happens, the ecosystem that depended on them must either adapt, move, or slowly disappear. It is a cycle: birth, growth, stillness, and then change. As you drift through this quiet, shifting world, you begin to understand how fragile and yet resilient these ecosystems are. Another fascinating detail is that not all vent systems are the same. Some release black, mineral-rich plumes. These are the black smokers. Others release lighter colored fluids, known as white smokers, which contain different minerals and support different communities of life. Each vent, its own environment, its own balance. Another quiet truth is that similar ecosystems exist in other parts of the deep ocean, not just around hydrothermal vents. Cold seeps, for example, are areas where hydrocarbons such as methane slowly leak from the seafloor. These chemicals also support chemosynthetic bacteria, creating ecosystems that resemble vent communities but at much lower temperatures. Life adapting to whatever energy source is available. As you continue drifting, the idea of strange ecosystems begins to feel less strange and more natural. Because life does not follow a single pattern. It adapts. It evolves. It finds a way. Another fascinating truth is that some of these deep-sea organisms have lifespans that extend far beyond what we might expect. Certain clams found near cold seas have been estimated to live for over 200 years. In a world where change is slow, life unfolds slowly as well. Time stretches. Another gentle truth is that these ecosystems are often isolated from one another. A vent field here, a seep there, separated by vast distances of barren seafloor. And yet, somehow, life finds its way between them. Larvae drift through the ocean, carried by currents, searching for the chemical signals that will guide them to the next habitat. It is a journey of patience, of chance, of quiet persistence. As you float here, surrounded by these hidden communities, you begin to sense how interconnected everything is, even in isolation. Another quiet truth is that these ecosystems challenge our understanding of life itself. For a long time, scientists believed that sunlight was essential for all life on Earth. But the discovery of hydrothermal vents in the late 20th century changed that completely. It revealed that life can exist in complete darkness, sustained by the energy of the planet. And this realization has had profound implications, not just for Earth, but for the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe. If life can exist here, in darkness, under pressure, without sunlight, then perhaps it can exist in other places as well. As you drift gently through this silent, chemical-driven world, your thoughts begin to soften. The idea of life expands. It becomes less defined by familiar rules, and more open, more flexible. And here in the deep ocean, you begin to understand one of its most profound truths: that life does not need light to thrive. It only needs the right conditions. And those conditions can exist even in the darkest places imaginable. As you continue drifting through this quiet, hidden world, where life is shaped not by sunlight, but by chemistry, a deeper sense of wonder begins to settle in. Because what once felt unusual now begins to feel natural. These ecosystems built in darkness, sustained by invisible processes, are not exceptions. They're simply another way for life to exist. One of the quietest truths about these environments is that energy flows here in slower, more subtle ways. Without sunlight driving rapid growth, everything unfolds gradually. Organisms grow more slowly, reproduce less frequently, and conserve energy whenever possible. And yet, the system remains balanced. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. Another fascinating truth is that some deep-sea bacteria can use multiple chemical pathways to survive. If one energy source becomes limited, they can shift to another, adapting to changes in their environment with quiet flexibility. It is a kind of resilience built into their very nature, and it allows entire ecosystems to persist even when conditions change. As you drift gently above a cold seep or vent field, you may begin to notice how the surrounding seafloor appears different. There are patches of white or pale yellow, created by bacterial mats, large colonies of microorganisms that spread across the sediment, feeding on the chemicals seeping from below. These mats are not static. They grow, they shift, they respond to the flow of energy beneath them. Another quiet truth is that many of the animals in these ecosystems are uniquely adapted to their chemical environment. Some can tolerate high levels of toxic substances like hydrogen sulfide, compounds that would be harmful to most life forms. Others rely on internal symbiotic bacteria to process these chemicals safely. It is not just survival, it is integration, the organism and its environment working together. Another fascinating detail is that certain species found in these ecosystems exist nowhere else on Earth. They are endemic, meaning they are completely dependent on these specific conditions. If the vent or seep disappears, so do they. It is a reminder of how delicate these systems can be despite their strength. As you continue drifting, you may begin to notice how quiet everything feels. There are no large movements, no sudden changes, only a steady, gentle activity unfolding over time. Life here does not need to compete in the same way as it does at the surface. There is enough for those who are adapted to receive it. Another gentle truth is that some deep-sea organisms form dense communities that resemble small forests or fields, clusters of tube worms, mussels, or clams growing together in close proximity. They do not spread randomly. They gather where the conditions are right. And in doing so, they create structure in an otherwise open space. Another fascinating truth is that chemical gradients, small differences in the concentration of substances, can define the boundaries of these ecosystems. A slight increase in methane, a subtle change in temperature, can determine where one community ends and another begins. These boundaries are not visible to the eye, but they're deeply important. As you drift through this subtle landscape, you begin to feel how sensitive life here is to its surroundings. Small changes carry meaning. Another quiet truth is that these ecosystems can exist at incredible depths. Even in the deepest trenches, far beyond the reach of sunlight, there are signs of chemical-based life. Microorganisms adapted to extreme pressure continue to process energy in ways that sustain the broader system. Life extending into the most remote parts of the planet. Another fascinating detail is that some scientists believe similar ecosystems may exist beyond Earth, on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. There may be subsurface oceans heated by internal processes, potentially creating conditions similar to hydrothermal vents. If so, life there might not depend on sunlight either. It might follow the same quiet principles found here in the deep ocean. As you drift gently through this thought, the ocean begins to feel not just vast, but connected to something much larger. Another gentle truth is that despite their isolation, these ecosystems are part of a broader cycle. Chemicals released from the Earth's interior, processed by microorganisms, consumed by larger organisms, and eventually return to the environment. It is a closed loop, self-sustaining, balanced. As you float quietly, observing this continuous exchange, you begin to sense how complete it is. Nothing is separate. Everything contributes. Another quiet truth is that human understanding of these ecosystems is still limited. Many species remain undiscovered. Many processes are not fully understood. The deep ocean continues to hold secrets, waiting patiently. And perhaps that is part of its calm. It does not reveal everything at once. It unfolds slowly. Over time, as you continue drifting, your thoughts begin to settle even further. The idea of life without sunlight no longer feels unusual. It feels possible, natural, even comforting, because it shows that life is not confined to one way of being. It is adaptable, resilient, endlessly creative. And here, in the deepest parts of the ocean, that truth becomes clear. Life does not need brightness to thrive. It does not need constant change. It does not need abundance. It only needs the right balance. And in this quiet, chemical-driven world, that balance exists. Steady, silent, enduring. And as you float here, surrounded by gentle movement and unseen energy, you begin to feel that same balance within yourself. Calm, still, at ease, drifting through a world where even in complete darkness, life continues softly, endlessly, without ever needing the light. Chapter 10. The Unexplored Frontier of Earth. As you continue your gentle drift, now deeper than most humans will ever go, the ocean begins to feel less like a place you are visiting, and more like a world that exists quietly on its own, unobserved, unrushed, unchanged. And here, in this final stretch of your descent, you arrive at one of the most profound truths of all. We have barely explored it. Despite centuries of curiosity, decades of technology, and countless missions into the sea, the vast majority of the deep ocean remains unknown, unseen, unmapped, ununderstood. It is, in many ways, the last true frontier on Earth. One quiet truth is that more than 80% of the ocean has yet to be fully explored and mapped in high resolution. We know its general shape, its broad features, but the details, the textures, the ecosystems, the countless small variations remain hidden. There are mountains we have never seen, valleys we have never crossed, creatures we have never encountered, and all of it exists right here on our own planet. As you drift slowly through this immense, quiet space, the idea of unknown begins to feel less like something distant and more like something present, surrounding you. Every direction, holding possibility. Another fascinating truth is that even when we do explore the deep ocean, we often do so only briefly. Submersibles descend, capture footage, collect samples, and then return to the surface. These glimpses provide valuable insight, but they are still just moments in an environment that exists continuously. The deep ocean is not something we can easily stay within. It is a place we visit carefully and for short periods of time. And so, much of its story remains untold. Another quiet truth is that the challenges of deep-sea exploration are immense. Pressure increases to levels that can crush most materials. Darkness requires artificial light, which can disturb the natural behavior of creatures. Distance makes communication difficult. Even reaching the seafloor can take hours. And yet, despite these challenges, exploration continues. Slowly, carefully, step by step. As you imagine one of these deep-sea expeditions, a small submersible descending through the layers of the ocean, its lights cutting through the darkness, you begin to feel the contrast between the quiet, natural stillness of the deep and the brief presence of human technology. It is a meeting of two worlds, one ancient, one curious. Another fascinating truth is that many discoveries in the deep ocean have come unexpectedly. New species, new ecosystems, even entirely new biological processes have been revealed not through planned searches, but through moments of observation, small windows into the unknown. It is a reminder that the ocean does not reveal itself all at once. It offers glimpses, and those glimpses change what we understand. Another gentle truth is that the deep ocean holds potential answers to questions we have yet to fully ask. How does life adapt to extreme conditions? What undiscovered compounds might exist in deep-sea organisms with potential applications in medicine or science? How do these ecosystems influence the broader health of the planet? The answers are there, waiting quietly. As you drift deeper into this sense of possibility, another truth emerges. The deep ocean is not just a place of mystery. Ecosystems cycle nutrients. Carbon is stored and released over long periods. Even in its silence, the deep ocean plays a vital role in maintaining balance across the Earth. Another quiet truth is that exploration changes perspective. The more we learn about the deep ocean, the more we realize how much we do not know. And this realization is not unsettling. It is calming, because it reminds us that there is still wonder, still discovery, still space for curiosity. As you float here, surrounded by darkness and gentle movement, the unknown does not feel empty. It feels full of possibility. Another fascinating truth is that new technologies are beginning to expand our ability to explore these depths. Autonomous underwater vehicles, remote sensing tools, advanced imaging systems, all allowing us to observe parts of the ocean that were once unreachable. And yet, even with these tools, the scale of the ocean remains immense. There is always more to discover. Another gentle truth is that the deep ocean has remained relatively undisturbed for much of human history. Unlike the surface, where ecosystems have been shaped and altered by human activity, many deep-sea environments have continued in their natural state, largely untouched. It is one of the last places where Earth exists as it has for millions of years. Quiet, stable, enduring, not analytical, but reflective, slow, open. It encourages you to observe rather than to act, to wonder rather than to conclude. And in that, there's a kind of peace. As you continue your descent, the darkness around you feels less like an absence and more like a space filled with unseen detail, quiet processes, and endless depth. And here, in this final chapter, you begin to understand something simple, yet profound. That the unknown is not something to fear. It is something to experience, gently, calmly, without urgency, because the deep ocean does not rush to reveal itself. It waits, and as you drift here at the edge of what is known and what is not, you begin to feel that same quiet stillness within yourself. As you continue to drift, suspended in the quiet, endless depth, the idea of the unknown begins to soften. It no longer feels distant. It feels close, surrounding you, holding you gently within its vastness. And here, in this final stretch of your journey, the ocean offers one last set of quiet truths. Not about what we know, but about what we are still learning. One of the most humbling truths about the deep ocean is that every expedition, no matter how advanced, reveals something unexpected. A new species, a behavior never seen before, a landscape that reshapes previous understanding. Even in areas that have been visited, the ocean continues to surprise. Because it is not static. It is alive and always changing in subtle, quiet ways. Another gentle truth is that many deep-sea species remain undescribed. Scientists estimate that a significant portion of marine biodiversity has yet to be formally identified. Creatures drift, crawl, and glide through the depths, living entire life cycles without ever being observed by human eyes. They exist independently of our awareness. And in that, there's something deeply calming. The ocean does not need to be seen to be complete. As you drift through this silent world, you begin to feel how vast that completeness truly is. Another fascinating truth is that the deep ocean holds records of Earth's history in ways that are still being uncovered. Layers of sediment on the ocean floor preserve traces of past climates, volcanic events, and even microscopic remains of ancient life. By studying these layers, scientists can reconstruct timelines that stretch back millions of years. The ocean remembers, quietly, patiently, without disturbance. Another quiet truth is that exploration itself is evolving. New methods allow us to observe the ocean without always entering it physically. Remote instruments can remain in the deep for extended periods, recording changes, monitoring ecosystems, and capturing moments that would otherwise go unnoticed. It is a way of listening rather than interrupting, of observing without altering. And this approach aligns more closely with the nature of the ocean itself. Gentle, unintrusive, respectful. As you float here, surrounded by darkness and stillness, another realization begins to take shape. That the deep ocean is not waiting to be conquered. It is waiting to be understood. And understanding does not come quickly. It comes slowly, through patience, through observation, through quiet curiosity. Another gentle truth is that the unknown does not need to be filled. Species share unexpected relationships, but here, in the vast darkness, those things fade. What remains is something broader, a sense of scale, a sense of continuity, a sense of calm. As you float gently with no clear boundary, no fixed direction, you begin to feel how freeing that can be, to exist without needing to define everything. Another gentle truth is that the deep ocean is not separate from you. The oxygen you breathe, the climate you experience, the cycles that sustain life on land, are all connected to this hidden world. Even if you never see it directly, it is part of your existence. Always has been, always will be. As you settle into this understanding, the ocean no longer feels distant. It feels familiar, connected. Another fascinating truth is that the future of deep-sea exploration depends not only on technology, but on care. As we learn more, we also recognize the importance of preserving these environments. Their balance, their uniqueness, their quiet stability all deserve protection, because once disturbed, they may take centuries to recover, and some may never return to what they were. As you drift slowly, your thoughts now soft and steady. This awareness brings not urgency, but gentleness, a quiet respect for a world that has existed long before us and will continue long after. Another final truth, simple yet profound. The deep ocean does not reveal everything at once. It unfolds slowly over time, and that is enough. As you float here at the edge of the known, surrounded by endless darkness and soft, distant movement, you begin to feel a deep sense of calm. There is nothing to chase, nothing to solve, only to experience, only to drift. And in that drifting, you carry with you everything you have seen, everything you have imagined, everything you have quietly understood. The fading light of the surface, the twilight of transition, the endless night, the glowing life, the silent giants, the hidden currents, the vast landscapes, the strange, self-sustaining ecosystems, and finally, the unknown, all of it part of the same ocean. The same quiet world, the same gentle rhythm. And as your thoughts slow even further, blending with the stillness around you, the ocean remains endless, silent, calm, waiting without needing to be found.